Last year, something happened to me that I still think about almost every time I park my car at night. At the time, I was 25 and living alone in a small town in Germany. I had been visiting some friends during my vacation, and I ended up staying later than I planned. By the time I left, it was around 1:30 in the morning. The drive home was about 30 minutes. The roads were almost completely empty, just the occasional car passing by. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I eventually pulled into the underground garage of my apartment building. It's one of those entrances tucked between buildings, easy to miss unless you already know it's there. I stopped at the gate, used my remote, and drove inside. Then, I backed into my usual parking spot. I left the engine running while I searched through my center console for something I don't even remember anymore. And that's when I looked up. There was a man standing directly in front of my car, about 10 feet away, just staring at me. I immediately locked my doors. He looked 45, maybe older. And then he said,
"Hey, my car broke down. Can you help me for a second?"
I didn't answer him right away. Something about him immediately felt wrong. I looked past him towards the garage entrance, hoping to see another car coming by. But there was nothing. No headlight, no hazard light, nothing. Just him standing there, staring at me. Then, he took a few slow steps closer to the car.
"Can you open the door for a second?"
He asked.
"I just need to use your phone."
At that point, every instinct in my body was telling me not to unlock the doors. I told him I couldn't help him. For a few seconds, he just stood there silently. Then, his expression changed completely. The calm look on his face disappeared, and he started getting angry.
"Come on,"
He said louder this time.
"just open the door."
That's when I noticed he wasn't wearing a shirt, just a pair of checkered shorts. That was it. It wasn't warm outside at all, and the more I looked at him, the less his story made sense. I told him I was calling the police if he didn't leave. The second I said that, he glanced around the garage like he was looking for something. At first, I didn't understand what he was doing. Then, I realized he was scanning the ground near the walls and parking spaces, looking for something heavy, something he could maybe use against my windshield. That realization honestly terrified me. He started walking towards the side of the garage, still looking around while muttering something to himself. That was the moment I decided I needed to get out of there immediately. I grabbed my keys, unlocked the car, and sprinted towards the stairwell door. I remember hearing his footsteps behind me the second I started running, not sprinting, but moving fast. I didn't look back. I just kept running toward the door. Luckily, it opened immediately, because sometimes the door sticks shut for a few seconds. But that night it didn't, thank God. I slammed it behind me and ran up the apartment as fast as I could. The second I got inside, I locked everything and turned off all the lights. Then I sat in complete darkness, listening for any sound outside my apartment door. That's when I finally called the police. I remember my hands shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone while trying to explain what happened. The police searched the garage and the area around the building, but they never found him. I barely slept that night, and honestly, I still think about what could have happened if I had gotten out of my car before noticing him standing there. Even now, I still wait for the garage door to fully close before stepping out of my car at night. And every single time I park there late, I look around first. I live in a small town outside of Portland, Oregon, and this happened about 2 months ago. I've had few strange encounters over the years, but this is the only one that genuinely made me think I was moments away from putting myself in a dangerous situation. It was a cold, rainy night, and I stopped at the gas station on my way home from work. The station wasn't very busy. There were 2 rows of pumps, one directly in front of the store and another farther away along the edge of the property. I pulled up to the pump near the storefront. The only other vehicle there was an older white van parked at the far set of pumps. As I got out of my car, I noticed a woman step out of the passenger side of the van and start walking toward me. At first, nothing seemed unusual about her. She was wearing a floral dress and had a friendly appearance, but something felt off almost immediately. She walked up with a nervous smile and explained that her van wouldn't start. She pointed back toward it and said she was stranded. Then she looked up at the rain and asked if she could sit inside my car for a minute while she explained. I hesitated. Everything in me was telling me not to let a stranger into my car. But also, I didn't want to be rude if someone genuinely needed help. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The woman quickly got inside the passenger seat and shut the door. The second she was inside, I felt trapped. She started explaining that the van's battery has died and that she already had jumper cables. According to her, all she needed was someone willing to park near the van and help her give it a jump. As she talked, I glanced toward the van. That's when I noticed the rear windows were completely covered from the inside. Not tinted, covered. The whole situation suddenly felt wrong. I told her I wasn't comfortable doing that and suggested calling roadside assistance instead. She ignored the suggestion. Instead, she kept insisting it would only take a minute. Please, I already have the cables. It's really simple. I just need a little help, she said. The more she pushed, the less I wanted anything to do with it. Trying to stay calm, I told her again that I wasn't comfortable helping. She didn't get out. She just sat there. At that point, I decided I wanted to end the situation immediately. And rather than argue with her, I started my car and slowly drove across the entrance of the gas station store. When I parked directly in front of the entrance, I opened my door and got out. She got out too. That's when I stopped trying to be polite. I walked quickly toward the store entrance. When I looked back, she was standing beside my car watching me. I expected her to follow me. She didn't. Instead, she turned around and headed straight back toward the van. From inside the store, I stayed near the front windows and watched. A few minutes later, An SUV pulled into the pump directly across from the van. A man got out and started fueling up. The woman never approached him. Then, a few seconds later, something happened that made my stomach drop. The van's engine started and drove out of the gas station without stopping. I stood by the front window of the store, watching until they were completely gone. My heart was beating so hard I could actually hear it, the realization that I've been moments away from being abducted. I stayed inside the gas station for another 10 minutes, waiting for my nerve to settle before finally driving home. What bothers me the most isn't what almost happened to me, it's wondering how many times they've done something similar before. The woman looked harmless, friendly even. The story about the dead battery sounded believable. Most decent people naturally want to help someone who appears stranded, only to realize at the very last moment that the situation was something much darker than it seemed. The reason I'm sharing this story is a reminder of how important it is to trust your instincts and stay aware of your surroundings. There are people out there who know exactly how to take advantage of kindness, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and a dangerous situation is that small voice in the back of your mind telling you that something feels off. If that voice ever speaks up, listen to it. I'm 27 now, but this happened when I was 10 years old, and it's still one of the creepiest memories I have. I grew up in a quiet town in northern Canada. Our house sat near the edge of a wooden area, with a large backyard that backed onto an open field. Beyond that field was a dense stretch of forest that seemed endless when I was a kid. One cold evening in late September, my younger sister and I were eating dinner in the kitchen while my mom was out visiting family. My dad was outside in the driveway, stacking firewood before the temperature dropped for the night. Everything felt completely normal. Then, out of nowhere, I got an overwhelming feeling that someone was watching me. I can't really explain it. One second, I was focused on my food. The next, every hair on my arm stood up. I looked toward the sliding glass doors that overlooked the backyard. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, I noticed a figure standing there. A man, just staring inside. For a few seconds, I honestly thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But as soon as he moved slightly, I realized he wasn't a shadow. He was a stranger, and he was watching us. My stomach immediately tightened. I told my sister to go down and stay quiet. She must have heard the fear in my voice because she didn't argue. She slid under the table while I crouched beside the kitchen counter and peeked around the edge. That's when the man started walking. Slowly, deliberately, he moved away from the glass doors and disappeared from sight. For a brief moment, I hoped he was leaving. Then, I realized where he had gone. The side entrance to the house. A few seconds later, he appeared at the door. I could see him clearly through the glass. He wasn't looking around. He wasn't acting confused. He wasn't checking if anyone was home. He was staring directly at me. Even though I was hiding, he knew exactly where I was. We locked eyes. Then, he slowly reached for the handle. I felt my heart stop. At 10 years old, I had no idea what to do. For some reason, I grabbed the kitchen knife from the counter. Looking back now, it's almost funny to think I believed that would help. But fear makes you do strange things. The man wrapped his hand around the handle and pulled. Nothing happened. The door was locked. For a split second, I felt relieved. Then, the reality of what had just happened hit me. He wasn't just watching us, he was trying to get inside. I dropped the knife, grabbed my sister, and ran. We sprinted through the house yelling for my dad. By the time we reached the front door, we were both hysterical. My dad immediately knew something was wrong. The second I told him there was a man trying to get into the house, he dropped everything and took off running. He charged down the side of the house toward the backyard, shouting as he ran. I've never heard him sound that angry before. When he reached the yard, the man was already running. He must have heard us screaming. My dad spotted him near the back fence and immediately chased after him. The guy jumped the fence, sprinted across the field, and disappeared into the darkness beyond the tree line. My dad followed him as far as he could, but within moments, the man was gone. Nobody ever figured out who he was. There were no arrests, no explanation, nothing. What still bothers me isn't the fact that he was staring through the glass. It's the fact that he tried the door. He wanted to get inside. A stranger stood outside the house where he thought two children were alone, then attempted to enter. I've replayed that night in my head countless times over the years, and every time I do, I come back to the same thought. If that door hadn't been locked, I don't want to know how that story would have ended.